All right, good night once again, everyone. So we're gonna make a start to IT classes. So so far we would have already completed chapter one, 7.1. So we're basically gonna do a quick review, a brush over, see if you guys remember anything that we looked at. So just some quick questions. Anyone that knows the answer, free to go ahead and answer those questions. So our first review question is, what is the use for spreadsheet?
They can be used to prepare budgets, payrolls, financial statements, etc.
Good. Anything else?
Sir, spreadsheets can be used as an organized form of record keeping or bookkeeping.
Good.
Sir, for invoices.
Good. Good. Very good. Very good. So, in addition to what if analysis and forecast modelings and so on. Very good. So, what are spreadsheets made up of?
Sir, rows and columns.
Rows and columns. Very good. And what are the names of rows and columns?
Columns are letters and rows have the numbers.
Good. So columns have letters and rows have numbers. Good. What else? So how do we get? So what do rows and columns make?
Cells.
They make cells, and how do we get the name of the cell?
By looking at the letter of the column and the number of the row.
Very good.
Sir, I could check
So,
the name box. Okay.
or you can get the name box also, but the names are created with the column name and the row name combined. So the column is always first, the row name is last. Good. Um, what is a formula in spreadsheet? What is it basically in your opinion?
A formula is what tells this what you input into the spreadsheet to tell it what to do
Okay.
or what calculation to do.
Okay, good. That's more specific. Good. Anyone else? It's almost like maths. When you hear formula in maths, what do you think of?
Sir, it's like an equation that calculates your input.
Good, very good. It not like it is an equation. So a formula is an equation in spreadsheet. So a formula is basically an equation in your spreadsheet that will be used to carry out your calculation. So just as how you would create an equation in maths, 2 plus 2, 3 times 3, and you get a formula, you get your calculation, same with spreadsheet. Now, when we're creating our formula, what do we try to use in the equation most of the times? Or what do we use to make our equation most of the time? Yes, Jahim?
Sir, equal sign.
I didn't hear that, Jahim.
The equal.
Equal sign, good, very good. We start with equal sign. And what else? Was equal sign is very important. So yes, this is the one of the most important part of a formula. But when you are creating a formula, what do you try to use as your source most of the time? As your input?
Sir, the column name and number.
Good. So that would be more specifically,
Sir, the name of the cells.
right. That would be more specifically the name of the cell. So we looked at that when we creating a formula, we always start with the equal sign. And the inputs, yes, you can use 2 plus 2, but you want to try to mostly use the cell names A1 plus A2. Good. All right. Um, all right. Let's see if anybody can get the difference. What is the difference between a worksheet and a workbook?
A worksheet and a workbook.
Yes. Worksheet.
Sir, a
Yes.
worksheet has over a million rows and I can't remember much columns.
Mm-hmm. Good. Going good. So what's the difference between a worksheet and a workbook?
The workbook have more rows and columns.
Sir, the workbook contains multiple worksheets.
That is it. So your worksheet, as Jahi mentioned, that's made up of the rows and columns. So those are like the individual pages inside of your book, your workbook, that contains all of the worksheets. So worksheets are the individual pages, the individual sheets that are inside of your workbook. Good. Um, Anybody remember what is a chart sheet?
So it's basically a specific page dedicated to a chart.
Exactly. So, as the name indicates, it's a sheet or a specific location that only a chart will be on. So, instead of seeing all the rows and columns in the background, you won't be seeing any of that. It's just a blank area for that chart. Good. Alright, good. You guys did relatively well. I didn't hear from a few persons. Hopefully, they were thinking of the correct answer. So, as mentioned, we already completed 7.1 and 7.2 up to before cells here. If anybody missed that class, the recording is in the classroom, so you can watch that back. Today we're continuing from cells. We're going to look at um, how we complete a cell, how we use cells and so on. We look at what are the types of data in Excel, how do we format those data, and other features in Excel we will look at. So we're going to start with cell, and we're going to start from the top. Anaya, could you read for us?
Okay, cell, active cell. The active cell in the document window is highlighted with a dark border, so you can tell where the cursor is located in the worksheet. You can move around the worksheet by using the arrow keys or with the vertical and horizontal scroll bars. Once you have entered data into the active cell, Excel will have several ways to complete a cell entry. These include press enter, press tab, press shift plus tab, press an arrow key, click another cell, click the enter button or the formula bar.
Good. So far we were looking at basically some of the terms, the description, the overall layout of spreadsheet. Now we're actually getting into how do we use a spreadsheet. So one of the main part of a spreadsheet is this active cell here. This active cell basically tells us where we are working. So if we open a spreadsheet, if my computer would respond. Why? Why? Great. So we have a spreadsheet here, and if you notice, anywhere that I click, I am seeing that darker border. That darker border is indicating where I am basically working from. So we already learned about the names of the cells, K1, A1. Now, if you want to work in those specific cells, if you want to type in those specific cells, you have to click on that location in order to type in those specific areas. So wherever you see that darker border, that's indicating where you are working from. That is basically equivalent to a Microsoft Word document. This cursor here, when you see this cursor, what does it mean? And it's blinking on the screen right now. What does it mean?
Sir, it means
Type
creating
start
some
window.
information.
Go to back, Lillian.
It means you can type start from there.
Good. It means that you can type starting from this location here. So if I type something here, the cursor is at the end. That means when I type now, when I press a key on the keyboard, that is where whatever I press will appear. If I put my cursor in front here, whatever I press will appear here. So this active border, this darker border that you're seeing here is basically acting like a cursor, indicating where you are working from. So wherever you put that cursor, whichever cell you select, and it turns that darker border, you start typing, that is where your information will appear. Good. So now that is how you know where you are working from. So when you want to navigate the worksheets, it's just like if you're using Word or a browser, you use the scroll bars to go up and down. Now notice though that, or you can even use the arrow keys. That might be a little more easier to navigate with because it's more precise and moving to the cells that you wanted to go to. Now if you notice that the scroll bar only goes so much because it's only focusing on the amount of data that you have on the screen. So if you press the arrow, you're going to go further, you keep going, but notice when I start going back, the bar starts to get bigger. Notice the bar getting bigger, and even though I scroll all the way out there, I cannot go back using a scroll bar. That's because there isn't really any data out there, so it doesn't lock into that area. So unless I put something there like that, and then I start to scroll back, notice the size doesn't increase, and now I can scroll back and forth between those two areas. So there's different ways that you can scroll and navigate. You have the arrow, but remember the scroll bar basically only works when you have data on the page up to that section. It only works up to that area. So that's how you navigate your worksheet. Arrow keys, scroll bar, so on. Now, your worksheet is made up of cells, and in those cells is where you would enter your data. So how do you complete entering your data? Well, we have a bunch of options here. Anyone can work, doesn't matter which you choose, but in some cases you might want to use a specific one. So you can either press enter, you can press tab, shift tab, use the arrow key, click another cell, or enter on the formula bar. So we are typing in the cell here. The first option is to press enter, and that completes the cell and puts the cursor below. So something like when you're typing a lot of data, you don't want to like use the mouse, so you can just be on the keyboard all the time typing, and on the keyboard all the time typing. So if you want to type straight down, the best practice is to use the enter key. So as you're typing, enter, you continuously go down all the time like that. Now if you want to type and you go across, you type tab, type, tab, type, tab. It all depends on basically where you want the cursor to go, so that you can go to your next cell and start typing instead of have to reach for the mouse to select a location, which can take up more time and might put more strain on your hand and so on. So it's like when you become more skilled with spreadsheet and using it more often, it's a skill that you'll want to more effectively and quickly put in data. So that's enter, that's tab. We have shift tab. What does shift tab do? Shift and tab. Because the shift and tab goes behind. So say you started from this direction now, you type in shift and tab, you go the other direction now. And when you want to go down, you just start pressing enter all the time. That's how you can work without even having to touch the mouse. If you don't want to touch the mouse also, you can simply start using the arrow keys. I like to use them because it's easier to navigate precisely when you want to go on a specific location. Arrow keys, or you can click another cell. Now this one can be a little tricky. Click on another cell, because you're in this cell here, you type in, I didn't complete it, and you click another cell, and it's completed. But in some cases, you want to be careful when you are clicking a cell to complete a cell entry. So as we go on further into spreadsheet, we're going to get into developing formulas, and we are going to be typing equal a1 plus plus a2 and so on. And what can happen is that you have this cell here has a formula inside, and you want to complete the formula and you go and click somewhere else. What would happen sometimes is that that formula would actually change depending on where you're clicking. So like if there was nothing there, when you go and click, you're actually going to enter the name of the cell into the formula. This is actually a feature, but it can trick some persons, and because they might not readily recognize that was happening. So it's just something to be mindful of, that when you're clicking to complete, if you're working on a formula, it can affect your formula. It can change what is inside of your formula. So click to complete the cell, or you can use the enter button that is on the formula bar. So this is another bar. We already learned that this is the name box over here on the left, and this here is your formula bar. So if you notice, when I click on this formula, the same information is appearing at the top there. So notice what happened there. I clicked to complete the formula. That was my expectation, to click to complete the formula, but I end up changing the entire formula there. So in those cases, you can simply press escape so that you do not complete the formula. Pressing the escape key, if you ever made a change to your formula, accidentally made a change, please remember this, if you accidentally made a change, you don't know what it is, just press the escape key. That will take you out of the formula, whatever was inside of the cell, doesn't matter what is inside the cell, and whatever change was made, it will not be saved. But the second you complete that cell, well, it's going to complete, but you can always do undo. But it's just some tips that you can make use of instead of drastically making any changes, and then maybe you can't even undo it later on. So just some things to take into consideration. What I was talking about is that we have the formula bar at the top here. and it basically tells you what the formula is inside of the cell. Now notice when a formula is completed, it does not show you the formula anymore, it just shows you the result. So that's why we have the formula bar, so that you can see the result and you can see the formula at the same time. So they work hand in hand together. So you can either edit the formula right inside of the cell, or you can actually edit it right inside of the formula bar at the top here also. Either one can work because they're linked together. Now, what they were talking about, click the enter button to on the formula bar, is to the right, to the left. You can notice this check mark here next to the formula bar. That there is the enter button there. So if I'm working on this formula here and I want to complete it, notice now it's highlighted. I press enter there, and that can complete the cell also. So there's a lot of ways that you can complete the cell. It's basically finding one that is going to be useful to whatever you are doing in your spreadsheet. Are you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Alright, if at any point in time I lose you, please let me know. And please remember also you are making your notes. So if you need me to pause or repeat something so that you can take note of something, let me know also. Alright, so if nobody's confused about that, let's continue. Arifa, you can read the next portion there.
Sir, you can hear me?
Yes.
You can also edit a cell in various ways. First, make sure the cell is active. Then either type over the cell's current contents. Note, the old data does not have to be deleted first. It is replaced by the new data. Double-click on it to modify its contents. Press the delete key to erase it and type in new information.
Good. Now, just like entering your data, there's also different ways that you can delete your data. We have three methods here. We have the type over method. So just like how you would need to make a cell active, the type, you need to make a cell active to replace the data also. So if I type something here and I want to delete this information, I first need to make it active. So after I made it active, the first method of deletion is the type over method. Now type over is basically used when something is inside of a cell, you don't really care what is inside of the cell. You could delete it and you just start typing what you want. So instead of deleting the information, you simply highlight and you start typing over the cell. It will automatically replace anything that is inside of the cell. Now that in itself can have a negative also. So say for instance you had a nice formula here, A1 plus A2. You got your calculation, a nice formula to get you your calculation. Why does it work? Oh yeah, I see. Go over here, put this here, put this here. Good. Yes, you have a nice formula there. It gave you your answer, 3 plus 3 equals 6. And for some reason you're not looking, you look away, you start typing, and you complete the formula, or you complete the cell, and you no longer have your formula. Now, you see what is going on here, but sometimes you might accidentally do it without your knowledge. Sometimes your hand just press a key in the keyboard, just one key you gotta press, and you do something and complete it, and you just wipe out your entire formula or whatever was inside of that cell. So it has its uses. It can delete everything that is inside of a cell. If there's a lot of information in the cell, accidentally, a lot of information, instead of you having to delete everything, just press one key and you have one data inside here. So that's one way you can delete your information. Now, you can also press the backspace key, and that's going to basically put you into the cell when you backspace. Notice the cursor appeared when I press backspace. Or you can press the delete key. But when you press the delete key, you do not enter into the cell, only when you press the backspace. So let me zoom in a little more. Are you going to see the cursor blinking? So up. If you press delete, notice no cursor on either side. Type back up again, and when you press the backspace, notice the cursor automatically appeared inside for you, ready for you to start typing. So it's another one of those tricks whereby if you know you're going to enter data, you use the backspace key. If you don't need to, then you can use the delete key. So it's one of those tricks that you're going to want to keep in mind. Like if you're going to constantly be on the keyboard, you don't want to move your hand off of the keyboard to go to the mouse. So because remember, you can use the arrow keys to navigate. So you don't really need that mouse anymore. You can easily navigate with the keys. So if you're typing something and you want to complete it, you want to delete it, but you don't want to go in, you press the delete key and you can continue where you want to go. If you're typing and you want to continue if you're editing the cell, you want to change it to something else, you press the delete key. But notice when you start pressing okay, arrow key completes also. Yeah, that's a fact also. So either one can work depending on what you basically want to do. Now your double click now. Your double click is when you want to edit a cell. So I typed this name wrong here. If I want to edit it, I would have to double click to enter the cell and position the cursor to whatever location. Say for instance, I don't want this J anymore. I'm going to replace it with I, and I'm going to delete that F. So that's the purpose of the double click, to position. If you made a typo or something, you can make that error correction there. Good. So those are some of the methods of deletion that we have there. All right, we're going to look at cell reference now. Ashley?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cell references are the combination of column letter and row number. For example, the upper left cell of a worksheet is A1. Example of other cell references are C25, EC304, and GG100.
Good. So far we already determined that our spreadsheet is made up of rows and it is made up of columns. And we already said that those rows and columns, when they're combined, they give you your cell. And I already said that cell has a name. Now, we also call that name the cell reference. Why we say the cell reference is because we are basically referencing the cell. We don't use the actual name, we use what the name represents. So, if you can remember from the last class, we said that how when you type in equal A1 plus A2, it's not that it's adding these letters and these numbers. It's not that it's actually adding A and 1 and 2. It's not doing that. It is using what is inside of the cell. So it's referencing the cell name A1 and A2, and it is looking at what is inside of that cell, pull the value over here, and carry out the calculation. So that's why it is called cell referencing. So notice I tried to complete the cell there once again, and it changed my entire formula. So escape. Well, I didn't complete that formula, so it went back to solid. That is a word. All right, you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, good. Alright, so let's move on to types of data now. So in a spreadsheet, there are basically two types of data. And our next reader is going to read types of data and stop at labels. That is going to be Christina.
Types of data. There are two types of data, labels and values. Labels are non-numeric data that a spreadsheet will not use in calculations, such as a person's name or an address. Values are numeric data which can be calculated. Labels. In Excel, any data that begins with a letter or includes a letter is defined as a label. For example, year or last name. Note that labels are left aligned within the cell and cannot be included in numeric calculations.
Good. So in spreadsheets and basically in other areas of IT, that when we get into database next term and when we get into programming in fifth form, we will be making use of data all of the time. And there are different types of data that we're going to work with. And the most common types of data are labels. In other software, this is also called text, because text and labels is basically the same thing. And values, which is basically numbers. So those are the two main types of data you are going to find in spreadsheet and most software. There are other types of data, but those are the basic most common types, two main common types. So labels are basically non-numeric data and they are not used in calculations such as a person's name, address, and so on. Now value is basically a number, it's numeric data, and we use those in calculations. So labels are text, they're characters, whereas numbers are values, they are used in calculations. Now the main thing to remember here, is that values are mainly used for calculations. That's the main thing to remember here. We mainly consider numbers as values because we want to do calculations with them. That's the main focus. So can you guys think of some numbers that we do not calculate? We do not perform any calculations with them.
Kind of like your phone number or telephone number.
Good. Your phone number. Anyone else?
Your candidate number.
Candidate number. Good.
Credit card information.
Credit card number. Good. Good. So you guys get the idea. Your lot number. Those kinds of numbers, even though they are numbers, we do not perform calculations with them. There's no reason for you to add lot numbers. There is no reason for you to add or multiply credit card numbers. It's not like you can increase the money in the bank. So there is no purpose in doing calculations with those numbers. So in IT, in those cases, we treat them as text. We treat them as labels because we don't do calculations with them. Our main purpose of having values is to perform calculations with them. So once we can't do any calculation, it is not a number. That's a very important point to remember. If you're not doing calculations with a number, it is not a number. So once again, one type of data is the labels. Labels are basically letters, characters, and so on. Now by default, when you type in spreadsheet, the labels or the text characters, they are left aligned. Anybody know what is left aligned?
Sure, is on the left side of the page or cell.
Good, very good. It's on the left side of the page or the cell. So if you notice, solid is on the left side of the cell. Let me replace that with a O before I end up for the rest of my life saying solid. Yes, so texts are automatically left aligned. That doesn't mean you cannot change it, but whenever you type with characters inside of them, it will automatically be on the left. Yes, you can put them on the right. Nothing's wrong with that. But it will always be on the left when you start typing in a new cell. Now, what about values? Lee, can you read for us?
Values. If the first thing you type in a cell is a number, Excel considers it to be a value. Note that values are right-aligned in cells and are used in calculations. For example, a sum of money would be considered a value. However, a telephone number would not be considered a value, since this type of data is rarely used in calculations. If you do not want the cell's numeric contents to be treated as a value, then the entry must begin with an apostrophe, or the cell can be formatted for text. This will prevent the number from being used in a numeric calculation. Examples of text format are years such as 2018, and identification numbers such as 826045, or telephone numbers such as 111-2525.
Good. So values, as we already mentioned, they are numbers that are mainly used in calculations. So as mentioned already, even though a telephone number is a number, it is not a value because there's no reason for us to do calculations with it. Unless we want to figure out what's the range of numbers, then that would be the only use for doing calculations with it. Now, opposite to text or labels, values are right aligned by default. So when you type in a value, 1, 2, 3, notice it's going to automatically go on the right hand side of the cell. Now, they're saying here that if there is a numeric value that you do not want to treat as a value, you can begin typing with an apostrophe or you format it as text. So, for example, in this case here, before these numbers here, we can put the apostrophe. I notice when we put the apostrophe, it automatically went over to the left hand side here. Now, what was the other one? Or you can format it as text. So formatting, one thing I haven't mentioned so far, but we were talking about the layout, is this ribbon at the top here. This entire white area with all of these options and features and settings that you're seeing. This is called a ribbon. And if you notice at the top of the ribbon, you're going to have what are called tabs. T-A-B-S. Those are terms you need to memorize. What is the ribbon? Where is the ribbon located? What are tabs? So all of these are called tabs. This is the home tab, insert tab, the draw tab, page layout tab, whatever the name is, tab. So why I'm bringing this up is because one of the key factors that you have to learn when it comes to IT is that they're basically going to be asking you on your exam, how do you use a certain feature or where do you find a certain feature? So you have to know the terminologies that you would have to use to describe how you would go about locating something. So for example, if you want to find insert page number, how to insert the page number, you would have to be able to say you go to the ribbon, you go to the insert tab, and you look for page number. Well, page number is not here because we have no pages here. So, for example, charts. How would you insert a chart? What are the steps? You go to the ribbon, you go to insert tab, you go to the chart section, and you select a chart. So that's the basic description of how you would detail how you are going about locating something or using it. So if you notice at the bottom, it has some names at the bottom, tables, illustration, add-ins, and there's a line that goes between. So the tabs are actually sectioned off with different features that you can use. So this is going to be called the table section, the illustration section, add-ins. You don't necessarily need to know what is the name of the section. It's just to know where the settings are under which tab. So for example, filter. Where do you find filter? You find it under the data tab. So that's one of the basic things you need to remember. So you see this box here? I don't want you guys to ever use this box. Yes, it can help you to find something, but don't use it. It's going to hinder you from learning where different features are located, which will have a negative effect on you. So you need to know what each tab contains so that you can work effectively. Now, under the Home tab, you're going to notice the number section. This number section is the formatting section. And if you notice this box here, notice when I hover over it, it says number format. So if I click on this arrow, it's going to give me a bunch of options of how I can format my data. So it's set to format it as text. I'm not seeing text here. Oh, text is at the bottom here. I'll just scroll down. So format it as text. I notice 54 went over on the left hand side to prevent it from being used in calculations. Now, one thing that happened is that even though we did that, it still carried out the calculation. That was something I was actually supposed to research as to why it is still doing the calculations with them. But okay, now notice it stopped working. Yeah, that happened last time. At first it worked and then it just stopped working. So you don't have to focus on this part here, that it actually worked and then it stopped working. What you have to remember is that to turn numbers into text, basically, to have them treated as text, to have them treated as labels, you either use the apostrophe or you format it as text. That's the main point to take away here. To format it as text or use an apostrophe to help prevent it from being used in the calculation. Yeah, I think basically it stopped working there. That's what happened here. Alright. So default value, when something means default, it basically means automatically. So whenever you do something and something automatically happens, that basically means that is default. That was what's going to happen every time you use the program, every time you use the software. So when you enter your text and it goes on the left, that means it's left aligned by default. You can't change it, nothing wrong with changing it, but that's the default setting. So you might get questions like, what is the default for text? What's the default for labels? And you have to know what they basically mean. So notice when I enter that character, just one character is going to make it appear as though it is text instead of numbers. Great. So are you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. questions? Any comments? Anybody want to add anything? No? Alright. So let's continue. We're looking next at formatting our values and dates. So we already know how to enter our data, how to delete our data, how to enter text, how to enter numbers, and so on. So now we're going to go into more how do we format our values and dates? How do we format those data that we put in? So our first paragraph, formatting. Jahim?
Formatting values and dates.
We're not hearing you. You're very low.
Dates can be entered directly into cells. For example, if you enter January 31st, 2018 in the cell, it will be formatted to a default format such as 31 January 18. Values can also be formatted for decimal placement, commas, dollar sign, and so on by selecting cells from the format menu.
Good. You might want to check out your mic because it still sounded kind of low. So when it comes to dates and values, we can actually add some additional formatting. So just like how we're writing a value, say for instance, we're writing down a million. When you're writing a million, do you write it this way or do you write it this way? Which way do you guys write it?
Second one.
What was that, Anaya?
Second way. You
Second
can't
way? Good. So most of you would write it the second way, the one with the commas, because you want to separate the values so that you can basically tell exactly what it is by just looking at it. Because if you were to just look at the first one, you got to count how many zeros and then mark it off mentally in your head. And then you're going to say that, oh, this is a million or a trillion or a billion, whatever the case may be. So it's the same with spreadsheets. You can format a value if you notice when you're typing in spreadsheets. Whatever value you type, that is what will appear. There is no formatting. So if you type one with a whole bunch of zero, there is no formatting that you have there. So by default, there is no formatting. So under the same number section, this is where you have all of the formatting to change your value, your text, whatever you want to make it appear as. So for example, this value here, if you wanted to add commas, notice we have the comma style here. So doesn't matter how many more zeros I add in, we're going to see the representation of all of those zeros. So we can easily tell what value this is. Now there's other options also. If you want a dollar sign, you can add in the dollar sign. There's an arrow right next to it where you can change what type of currency it is, euro, yen, and so on. So that's going to be up to you how you want to format your value. Now, so we can have decimal placement also. So right next to the comma style, you can notice we have increased decimal and decrease decimal. So when we increase, notice we have more decimal places appearing there. We have the period and decimal places behind, or we can decrease it and have no decimal places. All is up to you depending on how you need to format your data. So we have decimal place, commas, and more. What else do we have? So we have the dollar signs. We can even make it a percentage by simply clicking on the percentage sign there. Commas, increase and decrease decimal places. And also we have different options in here too that we can change it to. We can change it to a percentage, change it to up to a number, change it to currency. It all depends on how you need the data to be represented. That's up to you. Now, when it comes to dates, as mentioned before, in spreadsheets there are some default formatting. Left align for text, right align for numbers. Those are default settings. So for example, for date, if we type in Jan 30th, 2018, it's going to default to this here. So if we type in Jan 31, 2018, it's going to automatically change to 31 Jan 2018. So if we typed December 12, 2021, notice it automatically changed to that. Now that doesn't mean you cannot change it. Once again, we have the formatting section here. So if I want to change this now, I can go to short date, notice 12/12/2021, or I can go to long date where I can have the name also. Now these are not the only options we have for formatting. If you notice at the bottom here, there's also the option of more number formats. If you click on that, a box will appear and you'll get all of the formattings, general, number, currency, date, time, percentage, and so on. But each individual format has some settings for the settings that you can choose from. So for example, the date, you can specify exactly how you want the date. So for example, you want maybe the month to be spelled out, then the day and the year, we can have it like that. If you want maybe an abbreviation of the month and just the day, the year, you can have that also. If you notice at the top here, it says D21, but in the formula bar, we can actually see what is the full date. So it's not like it removed anything. It just changed the format or the appearance for you to see it in this manner. So that's the basic use of formatting, to change the appearance so that it appears as something else. Alright, so next we have text alignment, and we're gonna have Lillian.
Text alignment. Text alignments are just common in the formatting toolbar includes 4 buttons: align left, align center, merge, and center. The left center or align datings in the alignment of a cell on a single cell or a block of cells. If the text or number is as wide as the cell, then changing the alignment has no effect. The merge and center option is useful for centering headings. Select several cells, for example, A1 through C1, and then click on the merge and center icon. The text in A1 will appear to be centered across the cells, although it is still located in cell A1. For this feature to work correctly, the heading must be in the leftmost cell in the block range.
Good. So we have quite a few alignments here, 4 of them to be exact. So text alignment, just like in Microsoft Word, it is how you position the text inside of a cell. Y'all take 5 minutes break and we're gonna continue back. So as I was saying, when it comes to text alignment, There are four basic text alignments that we have. We have left align, right align, center, and merge and center. Now it's similar to what you will be familiar in Word. If something is left, it's on the left. If it's in the center, it's in the center. If it's right, it is right. Now the new one might be this merge and center to some of you. So if we look at our spreadsheet, the alignment is for the cell. Whatever cell it is in, we're not unlike Word where it's for the entire page. No, it's for the cell. Because remember, data only appears inside of the cell. So if you left the line in the cell, it's going to be on the left, on the right, in the center, and so on. Now the new one, to some of you, might be that merge and center. So merge and center now. Say you created a table, name, subject, grades. Let's have some name, Pamela. English, she got 30. Shaniqua, she got Spanish, she got 40. Good. Small table. Now, in this table here, say we want to put a title above this table here. We want to put a title. If we were to type in the center cell, so we have three, we have a center cell, and we type a title, so say SSC Report 2021. Notice even though we typed in the center, it's still not in the center of the table that we wanted. So what do we use? We use the merge and center option. So basically we create one cell at the top here, so put our data inside of it. So how do you create your merge and center? Well, you basically highlight the cells that you want to combine together. That's simple. Highlight the group of cells that you want to combine, and you select the merge and center option. So notice this border is now around all of these cells here. They have now become one. So when you type inside of it, the information is going to appear as though it is one cell. So if I want to create this here as my title, I need to select, I highlighted my cells, merge and center, and I have my information in the very center there. So that's how I can center my information above these columns so that I have a very nice appearing table. Now, if you notice, even though I highlighted three cells and I merged and center, remember each cell in Excel must have a name. So what is the name of this merged cells? These merged cells.
Sir, is it BCD1?
BCD1. Okay, good try.
Sir, would it be B1 plus C1 plus D1?
Okay, good try too.
Sir, would it be B1?
B1. Notice the name box. I was hoping some of you looked at the name box. Notice the name box. The name box only has one name inside of it. Now somebody said BCD1. If you actually type in that in, BCD. Actually, that's something I didn't show you guys. If you type in the name of a cell in this box, it actually locates it for you. So if I typed in A1, notice A1 got highlighted. If I typed in F2, notice F2 got highlighted over here. So that BCD1, if I type that in, notice that's going to take me to a cell name. So that there would be incorrect. And so basically what happens is that when you are merge and centering, it basically takes the name of the first cell. So the first topmost left cell, it takes that name. So notice when I highlight all of these here, notice this white area remains and everything else is gray because this is the topmost left cell, and that takes the name of this range. This is also called a range. The fact that we're highlighting multiple cells, even two cells, it is called a range. So whenever you make a range of cells, the top left cell is always going to be the name of that range that you are making. So if I highlight this here and I merge and center, notice the name box A9. That is the name of the topmost left cell. Now, the reason why I brought up that when you type in BCD1 is something you have to be careful with. That you have to remember the rows and columns in spreadsheets are basically almost infinite because they go on a very long way. If I continue putting letters here, RWY, and enter. Okay, so it doesn't have that. So let's see, R, no. Okay, so it doesn't go up to 4 letters. BC, so let me try X, no. Y. Why is it not working? It doesn't go that far. DBH. Okay, it goes up to DBH. How far does it go? F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X. So why wasn't it working this now? Okay, so it stops at XFD. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is how far it actually goes. So you always have to remember that if the program actually continued naming these columns, if it had continued naming these columns, then whatever string of character you had typed, if it was all of this here, and whatever number followed, it would actually still be a name of a cell. So even though you might think it is, it doesn't appear to be a name of a cell, it could actually still be a name of a cell. So it's something you have to be careful with. That once a letter and a number is combined, once letters and numbers are combined, letter first and number after, you're basically creating the name of a cell. And it could represent another cell. And remember, we cannot have duplicate cells. It's something that always must be unique. Good. So we talked about the different alignments, left align, right align, and so on. And we talked about merge and center. Remember, merge and center combines cells together, and we call that a range. And what is the name of that range? It is the topmost left cell. That is the name of that range, or that merge and center. That's the name of it. One more thing I wanted to mention about alignment, is that not only, well, these alignments here are basically for the horizontal alignment. Align left, right, and center. Those are for horizontal. Now, what if you made your cell taller? Like this here. Later on, we're supposed to learn about resizing cells, but this is basically how we resize a cell. If you put your cursor between the column or between the row, it's going to change. and you select and basically drag to make it the correct size that you want. So say that this cell here is this large, and so if we left a line, right a line, center and right a line, it goes horizontal. Now if you want it to go vertical, that is where we use the top part now. So if I want top align, I want middle align, and then there's bottom align. So in this case here, if it was necessary for me to make this cell this big, having this text here just in the center here is not going to look that good. You want it somewhere exactly in the middle. So that is where you have the middle align, so that it matches, or it basically neatly fits within inside of the cell. So those are some additional alignments that you would have. And then there's also these other alignments here, clockwise, angle, and so on, that you can use. Okay, so that's it for alignment. Any questions on that before we move on? Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
No questions, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, very good. All right, so next we're going to move on to cut, copy, and paste, something a lot of you should be familiar with, especially when you're creating assignments. Alicia, you can read for us.
Cut, copy, and paste. The cut, copy, and paste commands operate consistently in all Microsoft applications. The cut command removes the selected information and places that information on the clipboard. The clipboard is a storage space that temporarily holds information. This information may then be pasted to another location. Note that Excel copies the entire cell, including for the formula, their resulting values, comments, and cell formats.
Good. Good. So we have cut, copy, and paste. Now cut, all of you should be familiar with cut. Whenever you cut something, as the name indicates, is that if you're cutting it out from where it was, you remove it from where it was, and you're actually putting it in a storage location called the clipboard. It gets stored in that clipboard until you paste it in the other location. Now, one thing I want you to take note of is that the clipboard is a temporary storage location. So that is how you would describe the clipboard. So when it comes to cut, copy, and paste, you guys should be familiar with that. So when you type in something, you can right click, copy, and you paste it in another location, or right click, cut, paste it to another location. Okay. So now the important parts for you to remember is basically the shortcuts. That's the first thing you need to remember. Especially as IT students and EDPM students, shortcuts are very important for you to remember. So for example, if you hover over any one of these options, you're going to notice that they give you shortcuts to them. So like for example, copy, we have Control and C. What is the shortcut for cut? Anybody? So copy is CTRL and C. Anybody for cut? Y'all don't use Word?
Sir, I think it's Control X or Command X, I think.
Right, that's correct. X. So Control and X, or if you're using a Mac, that's going to be Command and X. Pace. Anybody has an idea what pace is going to be?
Control V.
Control V, very good. So remember, once again, if you hover your cursor over them, you're going to see it. Control and C, Control and X, Control and V. Those are the very common ones you should remember. Does anybody know what is undo?
Control.
C, good. What is redo? That might be one that you guys are familiar with. So that one is Control and Y. So notice undo is at the top here. If you hover over it once again, Control and Z. And if you hover over redo, Control and Y. So these shortcuts, you should remember them. Very important for you to remember these shortcuts. And as we progress, you're going to get additional shortcuts that you should memorize. So instead of clicking in these options, a more advanced professional users make use of these commands. Because remember, our aim is basically to stick to the keyboard. It's much faster to just be on the keyboard and constantly going back and forth between keyboard and mouse. So, cut, copy, and paste, we know how those functions. We looked at the shortcut keys. Now, the clipboard. As mentioned, the clipboard is a temporary location, a temporary storage location. So, notice when I copy here, notice paste appeared here. And we have some other pasting options, but that's not the clipboard. The clipboard is when you select this little arrow here. Notice when you hover over it, it shows clipboard. And a window is going to appear, and it's going to show you everything that you would have copied. So if I copy cut, if I copy paste, if I copy undo, if I copy redo, it's going to show you everything that you would have copied, even what you would have cut. I cut C, and I paste C here. Notice C is still inside my clipboard here. So I can still get back that, even though I cut it, I can still get it back and paste it multiple times. So if, for instance, you accidentally cut something, and you want to, and it already moved, and you want to get it again, you can use your clipboard. Now, remember I said the paragraph basically mentioned that it is temporary. So if you were to go to another spreadsheet, you will not see those cut and copy options there. Oh, you actually do. So the clipboard is going between, but if you were to close off the application and you were to clear out these information here, it will not transfer over to another. Actually, I think it would. Yeah, because even though I copy this here and I close it and I go over to another location, it will still allow you to paste. Every time I try to understand this temporary holding of information, I always find a way to contradict it. So I never figure out actually what they mean by temporary. But I'm assuming that if this was stored, this is not a permanent storage. So I'm guessing that's basically what they mean. It's not a permanent storage, so this information can clear out over time. So that's something that you can depend upon. Now you're not seeing it, but you guys can try it. What's actually happening is actually happening on my other screen. That's why you guys can't see it. But every time I copy and I have this clipboard open, what is happening is that it is showing me how many times I can copy. So it's actually showing me 9 of 24 because I have 9 things here copied. So if I continue to copy, 10 out of 24, 11 out of 24, 13 out of 24. So if I was to reach that point of going past 24, then in that case also it will be considered temporary. because the old information is going to get deleted. So whatever you would have typed before that came out of that 24 mark, that is going to get removed also. So in that sense, it is also temporary. Alright, so we looked at cut, copy, and paste. We looked at the shortcut keys that you should memorize, and also we looked at the clipboard, how the clipboard functions. In addition to another key factor when it comes to cut and copy, an additional point to take note of is that it copies everything that is inside of the cell. Whatever is inside the cell, it copies everything. So if you have a formula in a cell, it gets copied. If you have values, if you have any comment, if you have any format, everything gets copied. So new sheet. If I type something and I make it bold, I make it underline, I change the font, I make it bigger, I turn it red, I turn that black, I add a comment. Notice the comment is indicated with this red at the top there. I'm going to change this color so that you can see the difference there, see the red there. And if I copy this now to another location, notice everything was copied. So that's what copy does inside of Excel. It copies everything inside of the cell, everything you would have done to that cell there. Alright, so we're going to look at this last subheading here, column and widths, and then we're going to wrap up there. Because functions and formulas, that's going to take a while, so we're going to leave that for next week here. So column widths and row heights. So our final reader, that is going to be Pamela.
Column widths and row heights. By default, all columns in Excel are 8.43 spaces wide, but can contain a width of up to 255 characters. If a column has a width of 0, then the column is hidden. Rows are typically 12.75 points high, approximately 1/6 of an inch or 0.4 cm, which is just the right size to fit the default font. A row can be as high as 409 points, almost 6 inches, but a height of 0 will hide the row. You will often need to change column widths and row heights. If a value is too big for a cell, your data will be displayed as hashtag. If your text is too long and the next cell also contains data, then only the first few letters of your text will be visible. There are several ways of changing the size of cells in Excel.
Randon, you can continue reading.
Drag a column or row border to a different size. Double-click a column's right border to auto-fit the column. Auto-fit means the column is widened to fit the largest cell entry. Double-click a row's bottom border to adjust the row height. The row is adjusted to the largest font size. From the Format menu, choose Row Height or Column Width. If the mouse is used to change column width or row height, a screen tip appears that displays the correct size.
Good. So we have quite a few information here that we have to look at. We're going to break it up into pieces. So By default, once again, that's what automatically appears when you open the application. So by default, when I open a sheet, this is how it appears. All of the rows, the columns, they have a standard size. That size is 8.43 spaces wide, and it can hold up to 255 characters. Now, if the size of the width goes to 0, it means that that row or column is hidden. So in Excel, basically, as I mentioned already, if you go between and you click on the line, you can basically make the column wider or narrower. And it's basically, when you put it like this here now, you would have made the row hidden. So if you double click on it or you drag it back out, that's gonna widen it back to normal. So once it is 0, it basically hides that column. So a row is 12.75 points wide, which is wide enough to have the data default text inside of it. Now, once again, the same for the row also. If it goes to 0, you would have hidden that row. So row 5, if I carry it up, that row is basically hidden there now. I can't enter any data unless I would have made it back to how it was. So that's basically how you resize. You will often need to change the width of the column. Now this part here is important to remember. If a value is too big for a cell, it will appear as hashtag. So I basically need text over here, and then if I type in values over here, okay, I need another type of value. I need a long string of value. Convert it to number. Good. So if you ever see this here, a bunch of hashtag, notice I'm still carrying it out, and I'm still seeing hashtag. It basically means that the data inside of the cell, notice when you click on it, is at the top here, the data inside the cell is too large. So you need to widen the cell or the row so that it can fit the information inside of it. That's basically what that means here. It cannot show the information. Now, that's one important point here to remember. The next one is that if the text is too long, it's basically going to overlap into the other cell. It's not going to be in the other cell. Please take note of this. It's not going to be in the other cell. It's just going to overlap. It's like if it's covering over it. It's not going to be inside of it. So if I delete this here, it didn't work because this is right aligned. So it's looking to go this direction. So I'm going to replace it with text now, or I'm going to put the text over here. So I'm going to type something really long. And notice, because I have data in this cell, it doesn't extend further. Only values give you this hashtag here. Text basically cuts off to what can be shown. So if there is nothing over here, notice the rest of the text overlaps into the cell. Doesn't mean it's inside the cell, because even though I click here and start typing, I can type everything and it doesn't delete the information. It does that, it is empty, and there's basically nothing there, so it can overlap the information into that cell there for you. So that's two things you need to remember there. Knowing the row height and the row and the column height default sizes, I don't think that's that important. I've yet to come across a question that would have asked you what's the default row height and column size and so on. But this is important to remember, this hashtag and how the text overlaps into another cell. Alright, so how do you resize a cell now? Well, we have quite a few ways. It says drag a column or row border to a different size. And that's basically what you would have been seeing me doing so far. You go between the column, on the line, the cursor is going to change. You click on it, and you drag it to whatever size you want it to be. Same for the row, same for the column. That's the drag method. Now we have the double click method. The double click is called auto fit. Very important for you to remember. These terms are very important for you to remember. Double click is called auto fit, and what that basically does, it widens or it narrows to fit the largest cell entry. That's the important point to remember. However, it resizes if it goes bigger or if it goes smaller, it always fits the largest cell entry. So let me look at what we're talking about. So notice there's this big wide area here. If I double click on it, notice it narrowed enough to fit the information. Now if I double click on 4, okay, something did happen. I was actually expecting nothing to happen, but something did, and that was good. It went back to default. If I double click here, okay, good. See, nothing's happening when I do the same for this column, because there's basically no data inside of it, so it doesn't really know how much to go back to. So if I just type in 1 and I double click on it, notice it fits directly to that 1. Now notice at the bottom here I'm going to type a bunch of characters. Notice it extending outside of the cell. Now when I double click on this, it is going to widen to the largest data. That's what that line of text meant. Whenever you auto fit, it fits directly to the data in the entire row or the entire column, but it uses the largest piece of data to auto fit to. Because remember, that's to fit everything. So if I had typed more information here and it auto fits, and it auto fits. Why did that go to another page? Yes, and I auto fit this now. It's going to widen once again to this largest piece of data. So that's very important for you to remember, auto fit. You can actually use this most of your time, because you might not know if to go here or go there, because you're not seeing what's at the bottom here. You don't know if there's anything at the bottom. So how will you know? Well, only if you use auto fit to automatically fit the information in that row or column. But there's going to be some cases, say for instance, this line of text is at the bottom, and then you at the top type in, and you auto fitting all your life away, and you're wondering why it's not auto fitting. And then you scroll down, and you see this is stopping you here. So sometimes you might actually have information at the bottom here that you want. See, this is genuine information that you want, but it won't small in because that there is taking up the space. So in that case there, you would have to bring it in if you don't mind it affecting the data like this here, having it being cut off like that. So those are some things you need to take into consideration. As you continue to work on spreadsheet and exercises, you're going to notice you're going to come across all of those issues. All those issues that I'm talking about so far for the night, you will come across them. So hopefully you guys remember how to resolve them. Right, so that there is auto fit and how we can resize the cell by double clicking. Double click the row and it's going to fit to the largest font. So this one's to the column, that one's to the row, basically the same thing. And from the format menu, you can choose the row height, column, and so on. Now this is a nice one, I actually like this one. So from the format, it's format, format menu. Let's see, format, page layout, formula, data. Supposed to be right here. Yeah, format menu right here. So from this menu here, you're gonna notice the options here. So say for instance, this word type in that cell there, I can change the row height. It's gonna ask me to put in that point value. So this one is at 15. If I type in 60, notice it made it to that specific size. So say for instance you want a specific height and you can't get it with moving your cursor up and down or dragging this up and down. It's too difficult for you. You can go to this option here and type in the exact value that you want. Same for the row, the column, you can type in that value also. So if you want like a perfect size, you can do that there. Notice you also have the auto fit here. So auto fit column, auto fit row, instead of using that double click option there. Or you can put it back to the default width. You can actually set the default width here if it's going to be 9. Okay. Yes, that's setting the default width. So say you want to change the default width, you can do that here. So notice that 8.43. So I guess if you accidentally change the default, it's important. In that case, it's going to be important for you to memorize what is the default width there, 8.43. Okay, so you can also hide your rows and columns. So say for instance you entered a bunch of data here and it's no longer applicable, you don't want to see it anymore. You could right click at the top here and you're going to see the option of hide. And you'll have just hidden that row or column. Now you could go and drag it out as you would have seen me done before, or you could double click on it. It should supposed to allow you, but it's not working. Or just right click on it and select unhide. Either one can work. Or as you saw, you can hide and unhide right here also. So a lot of these shortcuts that you're seeing here and these shortcuts that you're seeing here, you can find the options right on the ribbons also. These are the shortcut options that you get from right clicking. Good, so if the mouse is moved to change the column width or row height, the screen tip appears and displays the current size. Good, so we saw that. Alright, any questions on columns width and row heights? Are you guys?
No, sir.
Alright. Anybody with any question on anything we looked at tonight? We looked at cells, data type, we looked at formatting, cut, copy, and paste, column width and size, row size, and so on. Alright, no questions. So in review of what we looked at for tonight, we looked at cells. In order to know where you are working, you look for that darker border. Wherever you click and you see that darker border, that is your active cell. You can complete the cells with these options here. For deletion, you can type over, double click, delete key, backspace. Remember the cell reference, that's basically the name of the cell. That is what we use to represent whatever is inside of the cell. We have two types of data. We have labels and values. Labels is anything dealing with non-numeric data. Characters, letters, symbols, even numbers that we don't use in calculations. And values is any number that you would use to calculate. Remember, labels are left aligned by default. Values are right aligned by default. We don't calculate all values, like phone numbers, ID number, the year, and so on. We don't calculate those. Well, in some cases, You might come up with a situation where you will, but that's going to be a rare situation. What is default? It means something happens automatically without you choosing any option. Format, we looked at all the some of the different formatting, how we can get more options, how you can change the date, how you can add decimal, comma, dollar signs, how you can change the different forms of alignment. When you use margin center, what is the name of the range of cells that you would have highlighted? How does cut, copy, and paste function? What is the clipboard? What gets copied and what doesn't get copied? And then we looked at how we can change our row height. What does hashtag mean? How we can change a column and so on. Alright, so please remember all of these features, all of these, everything that you're learning here, when it comes to the end of the chapter, you're actually gonna, or is not this exercise, is the next one. The next chapter, a bunch of exercises that you're gonna have to put all of these skills that you were learning so far into practice. And it's gonna be the same also for your SPA. So please memorize what where the different features are and how to use them and so on. Last attempt, any questions before we end?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Alright, if you guys don't have any questions, that is the end of today's class. Enjoy the rest of your night.